This video is intended to be a one-play concept video whereby I look at one Ravens passing play and illustrate some things that um, follow the pattern of Ravens concepts, or maybe some things that are slightly different where there's some design flaws or some superior design. It's also going to be a combined video in terms of a commentary on the Ravens' use of multi-tight end sets, so 2 or 3 tight end sets, or personnel groupings, I should say. Mark Andrews, as we know, played a lot of receiver in 2021. We saw him lined up at receiver. Now, when he's lined up tight to the formation like this, what do you call it? So if you're not sure, that's Mark Andrews right there. I'm going to let this play run once and then bring it back and maybe talk about the personnel. Andrews lined up tight to the formation, but away from the tackle to his side, is not playing tight end. He's playing slot receiver. Now, that is typically where a tight end would line up in some cases. But I want you to watch what happens when Andrews runs this route. So I'm going to, Andrews veers off to the inside. Marquise Brown gets a vertical release. We're not running a route up here with, I think that's Tomlinson. This is 2020 playoff game at Tennessee. I think that's Tomlinson. And we're not running a route up here with Ricard either. We run a delayed route out into the flats by Gus Edwards, the running back. But watch what Andrews' route does to this safety. I'll rewind it back and forth a couple of times so you can see the body positioning, the eyes of that safety. He is absolutely occupied by Mark Andrews. Look at his face mask. Everything he is aligned to do, everything he's focused on doing right now is to take away this route by Mark Andrews. Now, we have talked in 2021 about Andrews and other receivers reading middle of the field open, middle of the field closed situations. It's possible that we had Andrews read this, stop, and then bring this route back to the sideline. But the larger point here, if you ask me, is the gravity of Andrews. It's a middle of the field safety, so the middle of the field is closed, and that just isolates Marquise Brown on this corner for this deep out. One of the things that Marquise Brown wasn't always consistent on was really tight, sharp cuts. There were some times where he rounded things. And some of these routes, when we threw them, he wasn't as open as he could have been. In this case, he did a pretty good job. You see the space that is here for him to land on because the safety's absolutely occupied with helping out Mark Andrews. It's only a 3-receiver route. Andrews in the middle of the field. Marquise Brown, the intended receiver. This is a great catch. This is a fourth quarter, by the way. This is early fourth quarter, so this is a clutch catch. And then Gus Edwards late out into the flats. Great throw by Lamar. He had time, of course, and availability to throw the football. You see there's the timestamp. Early fourth quarter, we are up. I think we go down and get a field goal on this drive. All right, so here's the safety that I'm talking about right here. You can see his face mask, his eyes, looking at Mark Andrews. Simultaneous to that, Lamar is reading that safety as well. If that safety was to do something crazy and skip over to Marquise Brown's side, then Lamar would go ahead and target Mark Andrews. It's possible that Mark Andrews reads the middle of the field closed and brings us back to the sideline. I don't know that we were doing that in 2020. I know that T. Martin and maybe even Keith Williams did introduce some of those concepts in 2021. I'm going to bring this back to the all-22 view. Forgive me for messing with your eyes right there. And I'm going to talk about personnel now. I mean, this isn't designed to hurt feelings, but there's a lot of people complaining about, the Ravens not drafting a receiver in the second round, which is crazy. I mean, you got David Ojabo sitting there, you take him. But third round, fourth round, all those multitude of picks, I get it. But we use Mark Andrews at receiver a lot. Our 2 tight end formation or personnel groupings. So like this one right here, this is Tomlinson. We're going to have a better player on the field than Tomlinson this year. We are. Isaiah Likely, Charlie Kolar, Nick Boyle are obvious improvements over Tomlinson. The Nick Boyle we saw last year in 2021, I believe, was nowhere near healthy. You guys can let me know in the comments section, what you think. Point being, Andrews can play receiver. He can play receiver on the backside by himself. So he can play the X away from trips or away from twins. He can play in the slot, which is where he's lined up here. His right foot, his inside foot, I estimate is 4.5 yards, maybe 3.5 yards outside of Orlando Brown's outside foot. Maybe I'm off by a half a yard there or something like that. He's playing slot receiver here, guys. Now, typically when he aligns in this position, it's over on the other side of the formation, and he's running this over route. And you normally get a clear out route by the bottom side. So the safeties have they can go ahead and play Andrews, and if they do that, we've got the one-on-one up top, and you've seen Marquise Brown win some of those routes. By the way that I stumbled upon this play, I am in the middle of a video about Marquise Brown, basically saying, how much will the Ravens miss Marquise Brown? I have what I think is an in-depth answer to that question, and obviously some film to go along with it. That probably won't be released until Tuesday or Wednesday night. But in any case, we can do this with two tight ends on the field. Isaiah Likely could do this, what Mark Andrews is doing. He can run the over routes. He can read the middle of the field closed, if that's what's actually happening, and bring it here back to the sideline, or sometimes just sit the thing down if the middle of the field is closed. There's no reason to run the route right at a guy who's reading you and perfectly aligned to defend you. You might remember a video that I've done on a route that Mark Andrews ran where the middle of the field was closed against the Lions, where he turned that over route up the field, and Lamar ends up throwing it incompletion for a lot of reasons, not all of which are his fault. But my point is to hopefully allow people to rethink the lack of receivers being drafted. I'm not even talking about undrafted free agents. There will be plenty of times where Mark Andrews is on the field with Rashad Bateman, and they're both playing receiver at the same time. I don't know. I mean, where does Mark Andrews rank as a receiver in the NFL? He's certainly not top 6 or 8, but he's not anywhere lower than 12, 14, 16, 18, somewhere in that range. I don't know. You guys are probably better at ranking players than me, because I refuse to do that shit. I think it's dumb half the time. But my point is, we can have Mark Andrews playing receiver and operating in all of this space here. Intermediate, middle of the field type routes, which is typically where a tight end's going to, operate anyway. The video that I'm doing on Marquise Brown is not going to try to make the point that we're going to miss his deep playability. I think we might miss that a little bit, but what we will miss more is these type of routes by Marquise Brown, because these are areas that Mark Andrews doesn't operate it in unless it's a deep over route, like you saw against the Lions and Broncos multiple times early in the season, against other teams late in the season as well. Look, my overall point, don't get caught up in us not having another. Look, I wanted to draft Drake London. I did videos prior to the draft saying I wanted us to draft Drake London at 14, and I will stay on the point that I think we were actually going to draft a receiver at 14 if there wasn't a run on receivers so early. Having another tight end on the field who can actually run routes means we won't be doing this all the time. This is essentially a two-man route, although Gus Edwards is leaking out here to the right late, as I pointed out earlier. We can run this concept, and then the tight end, Kohler or Likely, can actually run a route over here. Tomlinson wasn't much of a threat. We all know that. He did have, a handful of catches in the 2 years that he was on the Ravens roster, but we know he wasn't a big pass threat. I think Likely and Kohler give us a great combination to work with Mark Andrews. Am I saying we won't miss Marquise Brown? No. For a more complete answer on that, watch my video that'll be released this Tuesday or Wednesday, because it'll be in depth and it'll hopefully present, opinions that are on both sides of the coin. And in fact, there's a lot of times I think there's not really two sides to a coin. I think there's more sides to it in terms of trying to figure out how much impact Marquise Brown had, how or if we're going to be able to replace, his yards, his catches, his big playability, etc. One thing I do know is there's nothing wrong with Mark Andrews getting the same amount of targets that he got last year, or even more, because he's going to produce. I mean, there's no argument against that. Like I don't know that we've had games where we targeted him 12, 14. Maybe there was one early in 2021. I don't know against who it was against, where we target him 12, 14 times and he only gets 5 catches. That's happened to some of our other receivers before. So my point is Mark Andrews is going to produce no matter where we put him at tight end, which we don't even really line him up as an inline 10 and a tight end a whole lot, to be honest with you, and then run pass routes. He's typically lined up exactly where I showed you here, except flipped on the opposite side of the formation. The offense is right, defense is left. I offer to you that we will be fine in terms of actual receiver play on the field. If you want to point out receiver production at the end of the year, and you want to omit the 110 or 114 catches that Mark Andrews is going to have, I feel like you're being a little biased and a little unbalanced because a certain portion of those receptions came when he was lined up as a receiver. How would you classify Travis Kelce? I mean, you can call him a tight end if you wish. Watch the film. The Chiefs are a spread team, and he plays receiver more than he plays tight end. When he does play tight end, he's typically lined up off the line of scrimmage and not really involved in the blocking scheme. We played him in week 2, so you can go back and watch the film if you have access to it. My point overall is there's a lot of tight ends that are essentially a glorified receiver at this point in time. Mark Andrews is one of them. Likely might be one of them as well. Kohler could be as well. We really drafted 2 guys who fit into the same paradigm as Mark Andrews. I'm excited for it. I don't think it was the plan going into the draft. It certainly wasn't the plan I advocated for. I wanted us to take a receiver at 14. You can go back and check my channel where I was talking about draft. I thought Drake London was the guy. Other people have indicated that it was going to be Garrett Wilson. We'll never know who Eric DeCosta was referring to when he said, we definitely had our eyes on one particular receiver. Let me know what you think of my thoughts. I merged 2 video ideas here clearly, and it went on longer than it should for talking about one play, but I was trying to touch on 2 points. Number one, the route design, and then what Marquise Brown did in terms of a real sharp cut, pushing that corner off deep, making it look like he was running a vertical, and then bringing it back to the sideline. And I can't wait to get the video out on Marquise Brown. I think it's going to have some cool plays that haven't really been talked about a lot by Marquise Brown, particularly how well he played late in the Vikings game. And then the other point is about personnel. Let me know if you guys agree with my points, you think they're valid at all, and whether our need for a receiver is as intense as people think it is. Having said all that, I think it's entirely possible that after week 6 or 7, the Ravens might go acquire a receiver. We might. We got Marcus Peters in 2019 when we needed a corner. We've been lucky that certain guys have been available that are not of the level of Marcus Peters. But my point is we've shown that we'll go out and get guys when needed. Let me know what you think of all of those thoughts in the comments section. And if you enjoy the video, please consider subscribing to the channel.